The dust storm hit Springerville, Arizona without warning, shrouding everything in a thick haze of ochre and amber. But Franklin Larson kept his eyes fixed on the stagecoach lumbering toward the town's only hotel. His mail-order bride was arriving today, and not even the worst dust storm in years would keep him from meeting her. The year was 1887, and at 32 years of age, Franklin had established himself as one of the most successful cattle ranchers in Apache County. His sprawling ranch, Whispering Pines, boasted over 500 head of cattle and employed 6 ranch hands. He had wealth, respect, and a fine home. What he didn't have was someone to share it with. The stagecoach pulled up with a creak of wood and leather, and Franklin tugged nervously at his freshly pressed shirt collar. The driver, old Pete McKinney, tipped his hat to Franklin before hopping down to open the coach door. "Got yourself a looker, Frank," Pete said with a wink. "Quiet as they come, though." Franklin nodded, his throat suddenly dry as the Arizona desert. He'd been corresponding with Olivia Zimmerman for 4 months, ever since he'd placed an advertisement in a Philadelphia matrimonial newspaper. Her letters had been thoughtful, intelligent, and filled with a gentle humor that appealed to him immediately. What she had not mentioned, what he had discovered only 2 weeks ago in her final letter before departure, was that she was deaf. "I understand if this changes your mind," she had written in elegant, flowing script. "I would not hold it against you if you wished to withdraw your offer." Instead of withdrawing, Franklin had spent the last 14 days frantically learning what little sign language he could from a book ordered from a catalog. His calloused fingers, more accustomed to ropes and reins than delicate movements, had struggled with the shapes and gestures, but he was determined to at least be able to greet her properly. A slender woman with chestnut hair stepped down from the coach, clutching a small valise in one hand and a letter in the other. Her travel dress was simple but well made, the dusty blue fabric complementing her fair complexion. She glanced around the street, anxiety evident in her posture as she searched the faces of strangers for the man she had agreed to marry. Franklin stepped forward, removing his hat in one smooth motion. "Miss Zimmerman." Her eyes, a striking hazel that reminded him of the mountains at sunset, found his face, but there was no recognition there. Only uncertainty. Franklin swallowed hard and raised his hands, forming the awkward shapes he had practiced countless times by lamplight. "Welcome to Springerville," he signed, his movements stiff but determined. Olivia's face transformed. Her eyes widened, then crinkled at the corners as a smile bloomed across her face. She set down her valise and signed back quickly, too quickly for Franklin to follow. Seeing his confusion, she slowed her hands and repeated, "You learned to sign for me." Franklin nodded, then fumbled through another phrase. "Only a little. I will learn more." Tears welled in her eyes as she retrieved a small slate and chalk from her bag. She wrote quickly and turned it toward him. "You are the first person outside my family who has ever tried." Franklin felt something shift in his chest, a tightness giving way to warmth. He offered his arm, which she took after a moment's hesitation. "Welcome home," he signed, and though his fingers stumbled over the words, the sentiment reached her clearly. The next morning, Franklin woke before dawn, as was his habit. He dressed quietly, careful not to disturb Olivia in the guest room where she would stay until their wedding in 2 weeks' time. His housekeeper, Mrs. Dawson, had assured him she would make Olivia comfortable while he tended to his morning chores. Franklin stepped onto the porch of his 2-story ranch house, breathing in the cool morning air. The dust storm had cleared overnight, leaving behind a pristine blue sky. As he pulled on his work gloves, movement caught his eye. Olivia stood at the corral fence, watching the horses with rapt attention. She had changed from her travel clothes into a simple calico dress, her hair loose around her shoulders in the morning light. Franklin approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. When he was a few feet away, he stomped his boot against the hard, packed earth. Olivia turned, feeling the vibration, and smiled. "Good morning," he signed, the greeting coming more naturally after practicing late into the night. "Good morning," she replied, her hands flowing gracefully through the air. "Your horses are beautiful." Franklin beamed with pride. Thank you. Would you like to meet them? Olivia nodded enthusiastically. Franklin led her to the fence where a chestnut mare was eyeing them curiously. This is Penny, he signed, spelling out the name letter by letter as his book had taught him. She is gentle. Olivia reached out her hand and the mare nuzzled against it. A delighted laugh escaped her, a sound that startled Franklin with its unexpected clarity and warmth. She likes you, he signed. I like her too, Olivia responded. She hesitated, then added, I have always loved animals. They don't care that I cannot hear. Franklin's hands hovered in the air. There was so much he wanted to say, but his limited knowledge of sign language confined him. Instead, he pulled out a small notebook and pencil he'd taken to carrying. I would like to learn more about you, he wrote, and I want to learn to speak with my hands properly. Olivia took the notebook, her fingers brushing against his. I will teach you, she wrote back, if you are patient. I have all the time in the world, he replied on paper before attempting to sign the same sentiment. His fingers tangled awkwardly, and Olivia laughed again, that same clear sound that seemed to brighten the morning. She gently corrected his hand positions, her touch light but sure. For the next hour, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, they stood by the corral as Olivia taught Franklin the signs for the things around them: horse, fence, sky, cloud, sun. His ranch hands arrived and tipped their hats respectfully to Olivia, watching with curious eyes as their boss fumbled through sign language. Eventually, Mrs. Dawson rang the breakfast bell from the porch, its sound carrying across the ranch. Franklin felt Olivia tap his arm and point to the house. Breakfast? She signed. Yes, he answered, the movement now smooth and confident. Are you hungry? She nodded, and they walked side by side back to the house. Over the next few days, a rhythm developed between them. Each morning, Franklin would rise early to handle the most pressing ranch matters before spending time with Olivia. She, in turn, quickly settled into the routine of the household, helping Mrs. Dawson and learning the layout of what would soon be her home. Every evening, they would sit on the porch as the sun set, and Olivia would teach Franklin more signs. His hands, so accustomed to the rough work of ranching, gradually became more nimble as he learned to form words in the air. On the 5th day after her arrival, a violent thunderstorm rolled in from the mountains. Franklin was checking on a pregnant heifer in the north pasture when the sky darkened ominously. By the time he reached the ranch house, rain was falling in sheets and lightning cracked across the sky. He found Olivia in the parlor, her face pale, hands trembling slightly as she clutched a book she wasn't reading. Though she couldn't hear the thunder, she could feel the vibrations through the floorboards and see the blinding flashes of lightning through the windows. Franklin sat beside her on the sofa and gently took her hands in his. Are you afraid? He signed. She nodded, embarrassed. I cannot hear it coming, she explained. The lightning startles me every time. Franklin thought for a moment, then rose and closed the heavy curtains, muting the flashes. He returned to the sofa and, in a gesture of surprising intimacy, placed her hand against his chest. I will tell you when it comes, he signed, then spoke the words aloud so she could feel the rumble of his voice beneath her palm. When he felt the vibration of thunder through the house, he squeezed her hand gently, giving her warning. They sat like that for nearly an hour, her hand against his chest, his larger one covering it. As the storm moved away and the thunder grew less frequent, Franklin realized that something fundamental had shifted between them. What had begun as an arrangement of convenience was blossoming into something deeper. When the storm finally passed, Olivia removed her hand from his chest, her cheeks flushed. Thank you, she signed. Always, he replied, the sign coming from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. That night, Franklin couldn't sleep. He paced his room, thinking about the woman sleeping down the hall, the woman who would be his wife in just over a week. Their courtship had been unconventional from the start, but he hadn't expected to feel this confusing mixture of protectiveness, admiration, and desire so quickly. At dawn, he gave up on sleep and headed to the barn. Physical labor had always helped clear his mind, and there was plenty to be done after the storm. He was mucking out stalls when a shadow fell across the barn door. Sheriff Tom Bailey stood there, his expression grim beneath his mustache. "Morning, Frank." "Tom," Franklin nodded, setting aside his pitchfork. "What brings you out this way so early? Wish it was just a social call." The sheriff removed his hat. "Got word that the Harmon gang broke out of Yuma prison 3 days ago. They were spotted near Holbrook yesterday." Franklin felt his blood run cold. 4 years earlier, he had testified against Jasper Harmon and his brothers after catching them rustling cattle. His testimony had sent them to prison for what should have been 10 years. "You think they're headed this way?" Franklin asked, already knowing the answer. "Jasper swore he'd make you pay," Sheriff Bailey said. "I'm posting deputies around town, but your place is isolated. Might be best if you and your intended stayed in town until we catch them." Franklin shook his head. "This is my home, Tom. I won't be chased off by criminals." The sheriff sighed, knowing better than to argue. "Then at least take these." He handed Franklin a box of ammunition. "And send word if you see anything suspicious." After the sheriff left, Franklin loaded his Winchester rifle and his Colt revolver. He found his ranch foreman, Eduardo Vega, and explained the situation. "We'll take shifts watching the property," Eduardo said without hesitation. "No one will get close without us knowing." Franklin nodded gratefully. "Don't tell Miss Zimmerman. I don't want to frighten her before the wedding." But keeping secrets from Olivia proved more difficult than Franklin anticipated. That evening, as they sat for their usual sign language lesson, her perceptive eyes noticed his distraction. "What's wrong?" she signed, her brow furrowed with concern. "Nothing," he replied, his hands betraying his unease. Olivia shook her head firmly. She pulled out her slate and wrote, "I may be deaf, but I am not blind. Something is troubling you." Franklin hesitated, then took the slate. "Some men who bear me ill will have escaped prison," he wrote. "The sheriff believes they might come here." Fear flashed across Olivia's face, but it was quickly replaced by determination. She took back the slate. "What can I do to help?" Her response surprised him. He had expected fear, perhaps even a request to delay the wedding or return to Philadelphia. Instead, she was offering to stand beside him. "Just be careful," he wrote. "Stay close to the house." Olivia nodded, then set the slate aside. She raised her hands and slowly signed, "We face this together. I am not afraid when I am with you." Franklin felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. Without thinking, he reached out and pulled her into an embrace. For a moment, she stiffened in surprise, then relaxed against him, her arms circling his waist. When they finally separated, both were flushed. "I'm sorry," Franklin signed awkwardly. "I shouldn't have." Olivia cut him off by placing her finger gently against his lips. She shook her head, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Then she signed slowly and deliberately, "Never apologize for showing me how you feel." The days leading up to their wedding were tense with the threat of the Harmon gang looming over the ranch. Franklin's men patrolled the property in shifts, and Franklin himself slept little, his ears straining for any unusual sound in the night. 3 days before the wedding, Franklin took Olivia into town to finalize arrangements with the minister. The streets of Springerville were busy with the usual Saturday commerce, but Franklin noticed the extra deputies positioned strategically around the town square. As they left the church, Olivia's hand tucked securely in the crook of his arm, a voice called out from across the street. "Well, if it ain't the rat who sent us to Yuma," Franklin froze, instinctively pushing Olivia behind him as he turned to face Jasper Harmon and his younger brother, Emmett. Both men looked haggard from their prison stay and subsequent escape, their clothes dusty from the trail, but the hatred in their eyes burned bright and clear. "Get out of here, Harmon," Franklin said evenly. "Sheriff Bailey's got men all over town." Jasper spat on the ground. "Don't see none of 'em right now. Just see the man who cost me 4 years of my life." Franklin became acutely aware of Olivia behind him, unable to hear the confrontation but surely sensing the danger from his posture. He moved his hand slowly toward his holstered revolver. "Don't do this, Jasper." Emmett Harmon drew his gun, but before he could level it, a shot rang out from the direction of the mercantile. Emmett cried out, dropping his weapon as blood bloomed on his shoulder. Sheriff Bailey stepped into view, his smoking gun still trained on the brothers. "Next one goes between your eyes, Harmon. Both of you drop your weapons and put your hands up." For a tense moment, Jasper looked ready to draw anyway, his eyes darting between Franklin and the sheriff. Then, with a curse, he raised his hands. "This ain't over, Larson," he snarled as deputies converged to disarm and handcuff the brothers. "You'll never be able to watch your back every minute of every day." Franklin felt Olivia's trembling hands clutch his arm. He turned to her, signing quickly, "It's over. You're safe." She shook her head, eyes wide with fear, not for herself, he realized, but for him. She pulled out her slate. "He threatened you." "He can't hurt us now," Franklin wrote back. "The sheriff has him." But the incident cast a shadow over their wedding preparations. That night, back at the ranch, Olivia was subdued as they sat for their evening sign language practice. Franklin noticed she kept glancing toward the windows, as though expecting to see Jasper Harmon's face peering in. "What's troubling you?" He signed, his movements now fluid after nearly 2 weeks of daily practice. Olivia hesitated, then signed slowly. "I bring danger to your life." Franklin frowned, confused. "The Harmons are my enemies, not yours." She shook her head and took out her slate, needing more words than she could trust him to understand and sign. "If something happens to you because you are distracted protecting me, I could not bear it. Perhaps we should postpone the wedding." Franklin felt a cold fear grip his heart, not fear of the Harmons, but fear of losing Olivia. He took the slate and wrote firmly, "The Harmons are in jail. They can't hurt us now, but even if they weren't, I would still want to marry you. You are not a burden to be protected. You are the woman I want to spend my life with." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she read his words. She took back the slate. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," he wrote. "I know you are brave and kind. I know you make me want to be better, to learn new things. I know that when I'm with you, I feel more alive than I ever have." He set down the slate and signed, his hands forming the words that had been growing in his heart. "I am falling in love with you." Olivia's breath caught. She raised her hands, then lowered them, seemingly at a loss for words. Finally, she signed back, "I am falling in love with you too." Franklin reached for her hands, drawing her closer until their foreheads touched. They stayed that way for a long moment, sharing the same breath, the same space, united in an understanding that transcended words. Their wedding day dawned clear and bright, the September air crisp with the promise of autumn. The ceremony was small, just Franklin's ranch hands, a few neighbors, and the minister in the town's little white church. Olivia wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Dawson had helped her alter from one of her finest Philadelphia gowns. Her hair was adorned with wildflowers gathered that morning from the meadow behind the ranch house. Franklin, standing at the altar in his best suit, felt his breath catch when she appeared at the church entrance. He had never seen anything so beautiful. The minister, who had been briefed on Olivia's condition, performed the ceremony slowly, allowing Franklin to translate the important parts into sign language. When it came time for their vows, Franklin surprised Olivia by signing his entirely. "I, Franklin, take you, Olivia, to be my wife." His hands moved with certainty and grace. "I promise to love and cherish you, to protect and provide for you, to learn and grow with you for all the days of my life." Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she signed her vows in return, her hands steady and sure as they formed the promises that would bind them together. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Franklin didn't need to be told he could kiss his bride. He pulled Olivia gently into his arms and sealed their union with a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. The celebration afterward was joyful, with music and dancing spilling out of the church and into the town square. Franklin was surprised to discover that Olivia loved to dance. She couldn't hear the music, but she could feel the vibrations through the floorboards and follow her partner's lead. As evening fell, they returned to the ranch, now truly their home. Franklin carried Olivia across the threshold, setting her down gently in the parlor that was adorned with fresh-cut flowers and lit with dozens of candles. "Welcome home, Mrs. Larson," he signed, his heart full as he formed her new name. Olivia smiled, reaching up to touch his face. "Home," she signed back. "With you." Their first weeks of marriage were filled with adjustments and discoveries. Franklin continued to improve his sign language, now able to carry on full conversations with minimal need for the slate. Olivia learned the rhythms of ranch life, proving herself adept at managing the household and even helping with the horses, which seemed to respond instinctively to her gentle touch. Word came that the Harmon brothers had been transferred back to Yuma prison, with additional years added to their sentences for the escape. The threat they had posed faded into the background as Franklin and Olivia settled into their life together. One evening in late October, as they sat before the fireplace, Olivia placed Franklin's hand on her stomach and signed, "I have news." Franklin's eyes widened in understanding and a grin spread across his face. "A baby," Olivia nodded, her own smile radiant in the firelight, "in the spring." Franklin gathered her into his arms, overwhelmed with joy. When he pulled back, he signed, "I never imagined I could be this happy." "Nor I," she replied. "When I left Philadelphia, I hoped only for security, perhaps companionship. I never dreamed I would find true love." "I will make sure our child learns to sign from the beginning," Franklin promised. "Our home will be filled with language you can see." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "You cannot know what that means to me." As winter descended on Springerville, bringing short days and long, cold nights, the Larson home remained warm and bright. Franklin and Olivia developed their own language beyond the formal signs, a private vocabulary of gestures and expressions that belonged only to them. In the evenings, they would sit close together, Franklin reading aloud from books, while Olivia kept one hand on his chest to feel the vibrations of his voice. Sometimes he would sign the stories instead, his hands painting pictures in the air that made her laugh or cry or gasp in surprise. Their neighbors and the townspeople, initially curious about the deaf woman from back east, came to admire and respect Olivia for her intelligence and determination. Several, including the minister's wife and the schoolteacher, asked her to teach them basic sign language, wanting to be able to communicate with her without relying on Franklin to interpret. Franklin watched with pride as his wife gradually transformed the community around her, bringing a new form of communication to their little corner of the Arizona territory. It reminded him of something she had written to him in one of their early correspondences. "I may live in silence, but my world is far from quiet." By the time spring arrived, bringing new calves to the ranch and wildflowers to the meadows, Olivia's pregnancy was well advanced. Her belly swelled beneath her dresses, and Franklin found himself more protective than ever, insisting she rest frequently and hiring additional help for the house. Olivia bore his hovering with good humor, though she refused to be confined to the house. Instead, she continued to help with the gentler ranch chores and maintained her small kitchen garden, claiming the fresh air was good for the baby. On a warm day in early May, as Franklin was inspecting a section of fence in the south pasture, his youngest ranch hand, Jimmy, came galloping across the field. "Boss, Mrs. Larson's time has come," the boy shouted. "Mrs. Dawson sent me to fetch you and the doctor." Franklin was on his horse in seconds, charging toward town to get the doctor while sending Jimmy back to the ranch with instructions to tell Mrs. Dawson he was on his way. When he returned with Dr. Wallace an hour later, he found the house in organized chaos. Mrs. Dawson met them at the door, wiping her hands on her apron. "She's doing fine, Mr. Larson," the housekeeper assured him. "Strong as an ox that one, even if she can't hear what's happening." Franklin rushed upstairs to find Olivia in their bed, her face flushed with exertion but calm. She smiled when she saw him and reached for his hand. "I'm here," he signed one-handed, not willing to let go of her. "The doctor is here too." For the next several hours, Franklin remained by Olivia's side, signing encouragement when she could focus on his hands and simply holding her when the pain became too intense. Dr. Wallace, who had delivered dozens of babies in Apache County, commented that he had never seen a father so involved in a birth. "Most men wait downstairs with a bottle of whiskey," the doctor said, shaking his head in wonder. "My wife cannot hear your instructions," Franklin replied simply. Where else would I be but here speaking for her? As the sun began to set, painting their bedroom in shades of gold and amber, Olivia gave a final push, and their child entered the world with a lusty cry. A boy, Dr. Wallace announced, quickly cleaning and wrapping the infant. A fine, healthy boy. Franklin signed the news to Olivia, whose exhausted face lit up with joy. When the doctor placed their son in her arms, she gazed down at him in wonder before looking up at Franklin with tears in her eyes. "He's perfect," she signed with one hand while cradling the baby with the other. "Just like his mother," Franklin replied, his heart so full he thought it might burst. Later, after Olivia and the baby had been cleaned up and were resting comfortably, Franklin sat beside the bed, watching his wife and son sleep. The infant's tiny hand was wrapped around his mother's finger, and her face, even in sleep, held a serene smile. Franklin thought about the journey that had brought them here from a cautious exchange of letters to this moment of perfect contentment. He remembered his anxiety upon learning his mail-order bride was deaf, his clumsy first attempts at sign language, the gradual deepening of their connection as they created their own way of communicating. Olivia stirred, her eyes fluttering open to find him watching her. She smiled and signed with her free hand. "What are you thinking about?" "About how fortunate I am," he replied. "About how much I love you. We still need a name for our son," she signed. Franklin nodded, looking down at the sleeping infant. "What do you think of Daniel, after your father?" Olivia's eyes widened in surprise and gratitude. "You remembered." "I remember everything you tell me," he signed. "Everything about you is important to me." She reached for his hand, bringing it to her lips. "Daniel Larson," she signed. "I like it." The baby stirred, opening eyes that were the same hazel as his mother's. Franklin gently touched his son's tiny palm, marveling when the infant's fingers curled around his. "Welcome to the world, Daniel," he signed, then spoke aloud, letting his son feel the vibration of his voice. "Your mother and I have been waiting for you." In the years that followed, the Larson Ranch became known throughout Apache County, not only for its fine cattle, but for the unique family that called it home. Franklin and Olivia had two more children, a daughter named Sarah 2 years after Daniel, and another son, Jacob, 2 years after that. All 3 Larson children grew up bilingual in the truest sense, equally fluent in spoken English and sign language. They moved seamlessly between their father's world of sound and their mother's world of silence, bridging the gap just as their parents had. The school in Springerville eventually hired a teacher who knew sign language, ensuring that deaf children in the area would receive the education that had been so difficult for Olivia to obtain back east. Olivia herself taught classes for adults who wanted to learn to sign, breaking down barriers of communication that had once seemed insurmountable. Franklin, who had once struggled to form even the simplest signs with his calloused rancher's hands, became so proficient that visitors to the ranch often couldn't tell which language was his native one. He and Olivia continued their evening ritual of sharing stories by the fire, sometimes signing, sometimes speaking, always connected. On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, their grown son Daniel and his wife having taken the younger children into town for the night, Franklin turned to Olivia and signed, "Do you ever regret it? Coming to Arizona to marry a stranger who didn't know the first thing about your world?" Olivia smiled, the years having added character to her face but done nothing to diminish her beauty. "Never," she signed emphatically. "You learned to speak with your hands, but you've always spoken to my heart." Franklin pulled her close, overwhelmed with gratitude for the day the dust storm rolled into Springerville, and the stagecoach brought him the greatest gift of his life, a woman who taught him that the deepest conversations don't always need words, and that love can find its own language. As the last light faded from the sky, they sat together in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, speaking volumes without saying a thing.